Well, hey, welcome back to the Amanda Kaufman Show. And we're going to address a hot topic today on the subject of public relations. And, the whole inception of this particular episode was I noticed in my LinkedIn I was getting hit up a lot more often with opportunities to do publicity and PR. Now, when I built my business from the ground up, my first strategy when it came to marketing and sales was avoid it completely. So that did not work. So I went and I sought training and coaching, and I basically learned two skills that changed the game. The first skill was high ticket sales, how to develop a offer that is very premium. And that was pretty amazing. And learning how to sell that literally changed my life. The second skill that I learned was more direct response marketing. And for small businesses, direct response is a really powerful skill set. And for years, I really didn't do much in the domain of public relations, PR. And it's more of a branding play. And I was like, brand, not realizing that was, of course, part of my brand. But what was happening is I'm getting a lot of inbound requests from, LinkedIn email, like, oh, Amanda, you're amazing. You should do this. And I had a couple of conversations with the inbound folks to get an idea of what they were pitching, but then I took it to Facebook. So I've been developing my Facebook network for most of my journey as an entrepreneur. And I just went to all my friends and I said, hey, who do you know who's in PR? I have questions. And that's how I got introduced to our very special guest, Lilian Sue. She is such a powerhouse, okay? So she was recommended to me from my network, so not from cold inbound. And she's based in Canada. She has 20 years of PR experience. And she was so gracious to come onto the show today to talk to us about some of the things that you might be hearing in your social feeds and to navigate through it. So our pre-conversation, I walked away going, okay, dang, I'm going to look at this in a completely different way. And Lilian, I'm so excited you're here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Amanda. I am really looking forward to continuing the conversation you and I last time and where we left off with that.
Yes, absolutely. And so Lilian, you work with a lot of authors, right? A lot of coaches and consultants to seek PR opportunities. Is that right?
Exactly, that's right.
Yeah. Cool. And so, all right, we've got to get to the brass tacks of these things. What you shared with me when we were offline was that the publicity industry is really full. The PR industry is really full of a lot of different sorts. And so finding somebody that you can really trust is pretty important. But there's a lot of practices out there that are not terribly, it's not like they're illegal, but they aren't exactly effective for small businesses. So I'd love to unpack that with you.
I would love to actually start with what you had mentioned where you were being approached inbound. That is a trend that's been happening a lot to a lot of the entrepreneurs I talk to, the authors I speak to, even clients that I've worked with. They've come to me and said hey, I got approached by whoever saying, pay this amount and you'll get featured in Forbes or the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or, whatever big publication it is that they're touting that day. And one of the things I really wanted to focus on is why entrepreneurs, coaches, consultants, authors, small business owners, they get burned by publicity. And some of that is because of this exact thing. They look at, big name publication. This is a great way to feature my business. I can tell people I've been featured on here without going deeper. They don't stop and think about, even if I could afford this, let's say, hey, we can do this for you for $50. Even if it's within your budget, that's not the only thing that matters. So many entrepreneurs neglect to ask the people pitching them and ask themselves, hey, is my ideal audience even going to be looking for me in this particular publication or platform? And the other thing they forget to ask is, okay, so for that $50 or $100 or however much they're charging, what am I actually going to get out of it, going to make paying for this worthwhile outside of just saying I was on a list that was featured in Forbes?
Yeah, I think that's so huge. I mean, the average small business owner, I notice, and I mean, I'm grouping myself in this too, dear listener. I'm not immune to some of these thoughts, but I've noticed like a lot of us small business owners, we start the business with all this like vinegar and we're gonna change the world, we're gonna conquer the world, and so you buck the traditional employment and then you very quickly realize like, "Oh, shoot, I've got to have visibility. If nobody knows about my business, then how are they going to think of me when it comes to my service?" And so that's like kind of the first thing. And then the second thing that comes very quickly after realizing you have to be visible is, oh my gosh, there's so many people doing the same thing. How do I stand apart? And, I think that's a really legitimate question to ask yourself. How do I as a personal brand stand apart? How does my business stand apart? But like at the end of the day, standing apart, I mean, you can do that very easily by being just kind of a weirdo, right? Like you can make people uncomfortable and they'll be like, "Great, you're apart." Like that's not really the goal. What the goal at the end of the day is you do want to be of service. You want to be selected in a competitive environment for the service that is being provided. And I think what's so interesting in 2026 is we really are in a season of trading on visibility and fame. And I was just talking the other day with somebody and I was like, there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that'd be very happy to spend $20,000 a month to be able to look like they make 10. So what about like the credibility piece? Does PR actually help me be more credible with an audience?
That depends on the type of
Okay.
publicity and how deep you want to go with it. Because that point you made about the fact that in today's day and age, we are 20 years into the internet age, everybody's talking about visibility. Visibility is surface level. In and of itself, it does not build trust and credibility. Let me give you an example of what I mean. I was running a live Q&A session in a networking group online with tons of entrepreneurs from all over the world. They all had different areas of focus and industries in their business. So I asked them, I'm like, okay, have any of you ever gotten leads from podcast interviews? Meaning, has anybody ever listened to one of your interviews and they've booked a call, they've downloaded your free resource, they've done something that allows you to continue growing that relationship with them? They tell me no, but they say, I have a great relationship with the host. Like we got along
Sure.
really well and I felt like we had similar audiences. So the thing that I said to them was, okay, first of all, I'm not telling you to pitch somebody who's a jerk, whose vibe and style and morals and ethics don't align with who you are. Definitely not. Like, don't do that. But getting along with the host is surface level. Like that is the bare minimum. And that in and of itself is not going to help you build trust and credibility or get leads. It comes down to, and I do this with my clients as well, where we really look at dissecting on how to close the gaps in their podcast interview strategy and really help them figure out, where am I going wrong? Like what's wrong with my positioning? One of my clients who is an award-winning author, she's a podcaster, she's a publisher. She came to me and she said, Lilian, I want to learn how to use publicity properly so I can lead by example for the authors I'm publishing. I said to her,
I want
hey,
to
that's
just give I want
awesome.
to give some insight to those that are watching and listening. Girl's serious, okay? So when we were preparing for this episode, we had a whole back and forth about the value of even doing this. And a lot of entrepreneurs will apply to my show, which I'll share how you can do that in a second here, but they'll apply to be on the show. They'll want to be on the show. But it's like they don't have a plan beyond that. And what I was sharing with Lilian as we were getting ready for this episode, I said the number of people who I keep encouraging, like, Do you have a lead magnet? Do you have like a free resource, a problem that you've already solved for people that, when they listen to the show, and they want to know more from you? And so many people will be like, oh, well, I have a LinkedIn. I've actually implemented a standard on the show that if you are giving me at gmail.com, you can't be on the show, right? And the reason is because there's a professional standard of, if you're going to build a business and you're going to go to the effort of this, because like this show, just to give a little behind the scenes on it, there's the pre-conversation, there's the interview that we're having right now. Then, we're going to take 20 minutes or so to just have the conversation. But even with AI production on our side, there's probably another 2 hours or more of time that goes into the curation and the publication of the episode. And I release 3 episodes a week, right? And I share all of that because a lot of business owners, I think, really underestimate just how much effort goes into quality visibility that actually translates to impactful results. So what would you say, Lilian, would be some examples of strategies that you might ask somebody that you're working with to make sure they implement right away? Like, what are maybe 2 or 3 things that if they just did that, they would probably see more return on their PR investment?
Well, I'm glad you asked this because this is what I worked with my author, publisher, podcaster client on, where I was like, okay, where's the issue? She said, I'm getting on author podcasts that are the wrong fit. So I asked her point blank, I said, when you're doing this podcast research, and this is something you can find in my free resource that I'm giving listeners as well. I said, do you actually sit down with the podcaster and ask them 2 questions? Number 1, do they know what their most popular or downloaded episode is and how the audience has responded to that? And number 2, do they have a plan in place to work in partnership with their guests to really promote the conversation, promote this high quality content that they're creating on your behalf? Because I said, it's not enough just to say that you are aligned when it comes to audiences. You want to know, is the podcaster treating this like a business, number 1? And number 2, are they just looking at having guests as being a one-way relationship, or is it a 2-way partnership, right? So once you have that research in the front end, when you are looking to get on podcasts, you then know, you have a better idea of, okay, who's actually worth my time? And it's this due diligence that goes into what I get into in my free resource and how I coach my clients as well into the conversation. Because when you're sharing a client's story, and unfortunately, a lot of the women I work with are guilty of this. They say, Lilian, I don't know how to answer that question because I ramble, I go off on tangents, all this kind of thing. I said, okay, to build your leadership through conversation, you have to know, A, where that natural stopping point is in the story that you're telling, and B, also make sure you seed parts of your framework into that client success story. So as I'm giving my client this podcast strategy, I'm also working with her on, what is your 90-day plan? What is the big goal at the end of the 90 days, and how are we going to work backwards from that big goal using this podcast strategy, which includes how to do your research in the front end. And the more that I said to her, you seed how you work with authors, the more that gets sticky to people. And if you talk about a free resource, they're going to be like, ooh, I got to download that at the end of the episode, right?
Well, and I think this is actually where a direct response perspective dovetails really well with a public relations perspective. So if you have figured out what a stranger will impulsively want from you, and if you've done the work to figure out, like, not just that a stranger wants this thing from you, but also it ends in a sale. It ends in a sale with your ideal customer. And you have that proof of concept from a direct offer kind of a perspective, it becomes so much easier, doesn't it, to then take that and pair it with your presence when you're doing PR, when you're doing the interviews for podcasts and for shows and making those appearances, you always have that lead back to the brand, ultimately to the conversation. If you're having a random conversation with a random request at the end or a random resource that you're including, and it's being told like a really random story, I mean, you can get, when we said burn, like you can really spend tens of thousands of dollars very easily on visibility that goes nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah, because
Yeah.
you have to be really intentional about how you're having the conversation, how you're sharing the stories, and at the same time, be crystal clear about what you want people to do. So what I say to my clients is, that old way of when people ask you, hey, how can we find you online? I said, and all of us used to give like 5 social media links and all of that. I said, don't do that. Give them one thing. Like, is it you want them to sign up for your workshop? You want them to subscribe to your newsletter? You want them to download your free guide? Give them that one thing and then reinforce that by referring back to your earlier conversation to make it worthwhile for them to download that.
Lilian, I'm so curious, when this is done well, when this is done correctly and has, it has excellence attached to it, what's the upside? It does take a lot of effort. It does, you've navigated avoiding being burned and all of that. So then what's the payoff? Is this, obviously you've given 20 years of your career to this strategy. So I'm so curious, like if someone was to take this seriously, what kind of results have you seen from it?
2 things. I can speak from my own experience and I can speak from client experience. Number 1 is putting that into practice has allowed my clients to be able to get repeat media interviews. And of course,
That's awesome.
there's been people
do a good job and then it leads to better good jobs.
Right. And there's people in my audience that are like, well, why would I want that? I'm like, well, hey, it is more opportunities, more chances, more touch points for that podcast audience to get to know more about you. Therefore, that trust deepens, that credibility deepens. And if they know you have a back catalog of episodes, they're going to want to listen to the older episodes too, right? So that's benefit number 1, to continue to build your reputation, build that foundation. Benefit number 2 comes from the folks that will then, pay attention to your CTA. Download your free guide, sign up for your workshop, and that means they are now in your audience. They are in your world. You have more of an opportunity to continue to build on that relationship with them one-to-one, continue nurturing it, and those people become clients. Like I've done one where it was a live Q&A situation. I had people signing up for calls before I even signed off on the live
That's
Q&A.
awesome.
So
that's really, really
works.
cool. And it does work. It does work. And I think like if you have been doing, like I said, more traditional, I keep saying direct response, that may not resonate with everybody. If you've been kind of like a funnel hacker or somebody who's created, structured marketing that's very like direct, that's the whole thing. It's like you directly respond. Like that's the whole thing. But also if you're doing content marketing, I think like a lot of people are writing, well, I know I write a lot of posts and create content and I do like all these things. There's this extra social proof that comes from being in conversation. And you're right, like the platform really does matter. So when somebody's charging a lot of money, for example, to rep you or to get you onto those media platforms, is there ever a situation where it is worth it to spend a little more?
Depends on the strategy and your goals, right? What I focus on with my clients is more so the realm of earned media. So the ones where you are building relationships with those platforms in order to have your story and your expertise featured. There is also an area where paid media comes into play. And that often can come into play with more of your magazines, your radio, and your TV, because as those industries shrink, airtime is at a premium. So say if you want an in-studio TV interview, they're going to ask you to buy a 30, 45-second ad. So when you're budgeting for those things, then it becomes a case of, okay, how am I going to utilize this piece of content in addition to it airing live? What am I going to do with it afterwards to ensure that it pays back what I've spent, that I have ROI on it, right? So there's different ways to approach this. And yes, budgets around publicity will often come down to your goals, your timelines, but also on the practitioner side, the people that you want to work with, how big of an agency do they have? How big is their team? What sort of focuses do they typically have on, hey, if they are used to working with big Fortune 500 company brands, chances are what they charge you is going to be similar to that.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Lilian, I feel like we really could talk for a few hours about about PR. Maybe we'll just have to have you back sometime soon. But I really do appreciate you taking the time to walk us through all of this. And you have a resource to share with us, yes?
Yes, absolutely. It's known as the 6 secrets to getting repeat media interviews. So like I talked about before, in doing the key research in the front end, in being able to seed your frameworks inside your stories, and also getting clear on your CTAs, these tips are in this guide. And I've got a few more in there that are really going to teach you how to stand out as a podcast interview guest that my clients have used, other entrepreneurs in my network have used, and they've seen podcast opportunities come to them because of it.
I can't wait to dig into that resource. And dear listener, we'll make sure to have the link around this video so that you can grab that and you can follow Lilian. Thank you so much for being here and for making so much space for this conversation. I really, really appreciate it.
I appreciate the opportunity as always, Amanda, and I would love to come back.
Amazing, amazing. And hey, if you know someone that you think would be a really good fit, here's how to apply to the show.
Hey, Amanda here, and I am looking for guests for this show. So I'm looking specifically for established entrepreneurs who've figured out a thing or two about how to make this business thing work in the context of a real life. So if you would love to sit down for an episode of the Amanda Kaufman Show and let me pick your brain in front of the people, then make sure you apply at clairevenue.com/the-podcast. Link is in the show notes. Let's get back to the show.
All right, my friends. And thank you so much for being here for another episode. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and do not miss another one. We always appreciate an honest review. And hey, if you've got a friend who's been thinking about getting into PR as a strategy for their business, make sure you grab the link to this episode and send it to them. Until our next episode, be sure to do what matters, and we'll see you soon.
Welcome to one of my first ads for Claire Venue. Yep. It took me about 3.5 years to do my very first ad in my first company. So I figure if I waited 3 months for this company, I'm already doing a lot faster. But yeah, so why do an ad? Well, because we show you how to use systems, and all an ad, my friend, is a system for getting the word out. And if you're really curious about how you could use systems more effectively in your business, then we should get to know each other better. And you should come check out the Inner Circle, where we marry the coaching and the wisdom and the motivational stuff with like actual brass tacks of systems to help you acquire clients and help you to not go crazy when you are a team of one or a few. All right, my friend, we'll get back to the episode. We'll see you soon.